Hi, it's me again. I believe this is episode 5, story number 5, I think. Doesn't matter. It's another great, true story. Another story that is an actual miracle. And this one is amazing. Now this goes back a ways. You know, I'd been traveling and singing around the United States and other countries for 40 years. And this goes back to before I had cassettes. And actually all I had was those big LP records, 33 and a third. Those great big LP records. Remember those days? Well, all of my songs and stuff were on records. And if I was going to travel like I did and was going to sell my records, I carried them in like a foot locker. It was an aluminum, but it's a red, white, and blue foot locker, a trunk about so like this and about so deep. And it probably weighed 50, 60 pounds and had it stacked full of my records, which is what when I sang, people wanted my records. And so on the way to Toledo, Ohio, and I'm going to make this story shorter than it could be, but it's another snowstorm, and I got caught in Chicago with a snowstorm, and we didn't think we'd be able to get out of Chicago to get to Toledo. And this, by the way, this was like on New Year's Eve, and I was going to be doing a concert in a large church in Toledo on New Year's Eve. Now, I carried my guitar with me, but it was on the plane, and all the baggage from the planes was stacked up. I mean, like this room and more rooms. Because the planes were delayed and a lot of them were canceled, a lot of flights canceled because of a terrible snowstorm, all of these bags that people had were stacked up like a mountain. And my guitar was in that bunch, and I needed the guitar for when I was going to be singing that very evening at a church in Toledo, Ohio. And so I didn't know what I was going to do and how I was going to get there. Well, finally, over the microphone, they talked about sending us on to our destination on a bus. But what good was it going to do me to go without my guitar? And I wanted my records also. So while I'm walking around through the airport and I'm walking past this mountain of suitcases, I happened to look down and I almost stumbled over it, but there was a rope around this mountain of baggage, and all the baggage was stacked up like a mountain of them, and almost as far as you can see. Anyway, I looked down and my guitar was sticking out where I could almost trip over it, and there it was laying there. So I just picked it up and carried it with me. And then they put us finally on a bus, and they bused me to Toledo, Ohio. And so when I got there, the church service had already started, I believe, if I remember correctly. And with my guitar, I sang my songs and I shared my stories. But I didn't have my records. People wanted to buy records afterwards, but I didn't have them. Like, my records were still in that stack of baggage back there somewhere in Chicago. So I could not sell one of my records. That's kind of disappointing. And so the next day after the concert, I took people's names that wanted me to ship them records. And if I didn't get them by the time I left there, and by the way, I was going to be there for about 3 or 4 days, if I didn't get my records by then, I would have shipped the records to the people who paid for them already. And so the next morning, the preacher and I went to the airport to see if my records had showed up in Toledo. And no, they hadn't. And there was a pile of luggage there, just like there was in Chicago. I'd say hundreds and hundreds of bags piled up high. And of course, the guy who was in charge of the luggage there, he'd say, well, do you see your bag? Well, mine was a red, white, and blue trunk. And I couldn't see it anywhere and the stuff. And so then they had another room, which is a small room, probably about a 10-foot wide by 10-foot wide little storage room. And I think this was bags and stuff that they had found and was waiting for people to pick them up. So we went back into that room, and my red, white, and blue trunk was not there either. And so he said, well, come back tomorrow. And I had about 3 or 4 days, I guess I was going to stick around there. And so we went the next day, and by this time the guy recognized me, the guy that was in charge of baggage. And he took me right back to that room where all these bags were stacked up. That was the ones that was supposedly found. And my bag wasn't there. My red, white, and blue trunk was gone. Gone. It wasn't there. And so the next day, I went back again. And this guy said, no, it hasn't arrived. And I said, man, I sure hope it. I'm getting ready to leave tomorrow. How am I going to? He said, we'll have your bags catch up with you. But he said, they're just not here. So he said, if you'd like to go back into that one room again and look, why, we can do that. But he says, I know that's not there. And we did. We went back. But I got to tell you this. Before we went that day, the preacher and I knelt in on our knees, and we prayed and asked God to bring it, to deliver those records to me. And I guess I don't know if I had the faith to believe that he actually would or not, but we prayed that he would deliver the records. Anyway, when we get to the airport, the guy says they have not arrived, and he says, if you'd like to look, you may. So we looked at that big stack I was talking about. It was just about whittled down to almost nothing, and my red, white, and blue trunk wasn't there. And I said, well, can we look in that room, that other room? He said, yeah, but it's not there either. And so we went in there, and he was right. And it's a small room, so we're standing there talking about this red, white, and blue trunk. And it's not there, and it's obvious because now I'm in this room, and there's only about 8 or 9 bags in the whole room. So it's obvious that my bag is not there. And so while we're talking about where he's going to ship them and stuff, and I mentioned to him that we had prayed, and nothing has happened, though I didn't think my prayer was answered. But I felt a weight suddenly on my toe. And I looked down, and this red, white, and blue trunk, this big, was resting on my foot. I know. It's hard to believe. I was just looking at Daryl and the look on his face. I absolutely was shocked. I said, that's it right there. The guy said, my God. I said, yes, my God. I said, where did it come from? He said, where did it come from? I'm telling you, there was only 8 or 9 bags in that room. And the red, white, and blue trunk was not there, and suddenly it was there. It was sitting on my foot. We were both totally shocked. Well, to make a long story short, I got my trunk given to me, went back into town, I delivered the records to the people who had bought them, and I went on my merry way the next day. But there was another one of those miracles where, for some reason or other, God blessed me. And sometimes I wonder why, because I never felt I was worthy to be blessed like that. But all we did was the day before we went in there, we said, Lord, we need those. Would you send them to us? He delivered them, and he put them right on my foot. Now, that's a story that's hard to believe. It's hard for me to believe. I tell the story knowing that I'm going to face God one day. And I know that I've got to be honest. And that's exactly the way it happened. So, delight yourself in the Lord. He'll give you the desires of your heart. And this is one thing that I blame my answered prayers on, is that when times get rough, when things look bad, when it doesn't look like there's an answer, you continue to believe in God. You continue to believe the scripture that says, delight yourself in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart. Also, all things work together for good to those who love the Lord. And God has done it for me over and over and over. And of course, it works out for good. So the thing to do is to keep the right attitude when you come upon a problem. Here is what I have learned through my life. We Christians do not really have problems. We have opportunities. Because when you come upon what we think is a problem, it's an opportunity for us to practice our faith in God. It's an opportunity to practice delighting in the Lord. It is an opportunity to show God that you believe. And that's when God answers prayer. When you have the right attitude and you respond the right way. So, and I didn't always, there's times I failed the Lord in many things. I'm talking about the times when I didn't fail. I'm talking about the times when God really blessed and when I didn't feel I deserved it, but the times when I must have done it right. So that's just another miracle that God gave me. And I've got some better than that I'm going to tell as time goes on. So tune back in tomorrow or the next day, because I'm going to be adding more of these stories. And I know they're short, and I know they sound almost impossible, but like I said, I know who I got to face. I'm 86 years old. I'm getting ready to meet the Lord, and I know who I got to face. And if I'm not telling the truth, I'm in trouble. So I'm telling you, I know that what I just told you is a true story. And so stick around and hear some even better than that. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in.